Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. You call this a D-level ability. Chapter 81. In a few breaths, Tang Xiaowen rushed to the entrance and stared at Shu Yi closely. Shu Yi's scalp was numb and he was cursing in his mind how outrageous the school was. He quickly grabbed his hand on the door handle and prepared to rush out. But when he pushed the door hard, he found that the door didn't move at all. A faint energy enveloped the door lock. The door handle he held tightly turned into 5 large locks, firmly sealing the door. This guy actually used his ability. Shu Yi was forced to loosen the 5 big locks, and was forced to retreat by Tang Xiaowen, clinging to the door. Snapped. Tang Xiaowen reached forward with his right hand and pressed hard against the door. His whole body was close to Shu Yi. From this distance, Shu Yi could even smell the faint smell of shower gel on her body. Her nearly flawless face was flushed, and she seemed very emotional. I said. Shu Yi twitched the corners of his mouth slightly in embarrassment. Is our posture reversed? He did not expect that he would be pushed against the door by Tang Xiaowen. When Shu Yi said this, Tang Xiaowen's ears suddenly turned red. She had never had such contact with the opposite sex, and she suddenly felt a little shy. But she still stared at Shu Yi closely and asked word by word, "You know your sister, right? You were the one who went to the art exhibition with your sister that day, right? I have told you many times, I don't know the sister you are talking about." Shu Yi looked helpless, raised his hands, and responded with sincerity on his face. "Those things you said are just your conjectures and coincidences. I know that you have been surrounded by stars since you were a child, and it's normal to be a little narcissistic, but you can't slander my innocence." He was eloquent and tried to steer the conversation away. But Tang Xiaowen was not diverted by his words at all. Instead, he used his free left hand to grab Shu Yi's chest. "Hey, I'm warning you, I'm not the kind of person who takes it easy. If you touch me, I'll yell at you." Shu Yi protected himself and tried to avoid it. But Tang Xiaowen's left hand was very fast, and he instantly grabbed the skirt of his shirt and pulled it away with force. The buttons of his coat were pulled open, and his chest was exposed. A light red thread hung around his neck, and a light green sachet hung near his chest. "If you don't know sister." Tang Xiaowen breathed rapidly, pinching the light green sachet as if he were protecting some treasure, not daring to use any force. "Why is this on your body? This is just an amulet sold at a temple fair. What's so special about it?" Shu Yi squeezed Tang Xiaowen's wrist hard, as if he was worried that she would tear the amulet off. He secretly said that he was careless. In the previous battle with the stone giant, his clothes were torn by the attack. Tang Xiaowen must have discovered the amulet at that time. How could this be the amulet of the temple fair? Tang Xiaowen's voice suddenly became a little louder, and his tone became extremely excited. She retracted her hands, and suddenly tugged with them as if to pull apart her pajamas. "Say what you have to say, don't take off your clothes." Shu Yi quickly covered his eyes, looked forward through his fingers, and shouted loudly. But the next second he was stunned. But she saw that Tang Xiaowen's collarbone was exposed, and between her neck, there was a light green sachet exactly like his. Tears seemed to well up from the corners of Tang Xiaowen's eyes, and his voice became very excited at this moment. "This sachet was hand-sewn by my sister. The herbs inside were bought with the money she earned from her part-time job. The amulet stored in the middle was carved by her own hands for a whole month. These 2 amulets are unique in this world and there is absolutely no way they can be imitated." She quickly turned the sachet around her neck to the back, and then reached out to grab Shu Yi's sachet. Behind the 2 sachets, there is a flower pattern. This flower is extremely gorgeous, has clear lines, and looks exactly the same. "This is epiphyllum, my sister's favorite flower." Tang Xiaowen's voice began to tremble slightly. "Everything she made will leave this pattern." Shu Yi was silent for a long time and was about to open his mouth. Tang Xiaowen's voice came again. "Sister once told me that she put all her good luck into these 2 amulets. One of the amulets was given to me and the other to the cool kid. She hoped to put her blessings and good luck in the amulet to protect us all the time." She stared closely into Shu Yi's eyes, her eyes full of obsession. "Shu Yi, do you dare to look into my eyes and tell me again, don't you know my sister?" When Shu Yi heard this, his pupils suddenly trembled slightly. "Hey, Shu Yi, I'll give you a small gift." The girl's smile was as bright as a flower, but her eyes were filled with deep fatigue, and there were faint dark circles around the corners of her eyes. What is this? Shu Yi looked at the object in the girl's palm and found that it was a light green sachet. This is an amulet. The girl blinked and said with a smile, I went to the temple fair to ask for it. You know, the gods there are amazing. It is said that the amulets obtained from there can ward off disasters and protect peace. I don't believe in this kind of thing. Shu Yi shook his head. Rather than praying to gods and worshipping Buddha, I believe that man can conquer nature. You should keep this kind of thing to yourself. Don't say that. The girl smiled and picked up the amulet, ignoring Shu Yi's struggle, and put it directly on his neck. Sometimes, fate is very unpredictable. Maybe this amulet can really protect you in secret. And if one day we can't see each other for some reason, you can think of me when you see it, right? Shu Yi frowned, but after seeing the girl's innocent expression, he could only sigh helplessly and did not take off the amulet around his neck. Hee, if you feel embarrassed, you can hide it in your clothes. The girl smiled slyly and jumped forward with her hands behind her back. Let's go, you promised me that you would accompany me to an art exhibition. This is the price you pay for losing a bet to me. Shu Yi shrugged his shoulders and followed her slowly. It's just a coincidence that I lost to you. That's not a coincidence, it's the power of trust. You must be willing to admit defeat. Why don't you take your sister with you? You know I know nothing about art. She has something to do today and can't accompany me, otherwise I wouldn't come to you. I think she also thinks that looking at these so-called works of art is a waste of time. Stop talking nonsense. The girl crossed her hips angrily, but after turning around, she thought of something again and smiled again. By the way, you must take good care of that amulet and never throw it away. She turned her head quickly, and her tone became slightly panicked for some reason. Let's go quickly, I must teach you how to appreciate art. Shu Yi took a deep breath and silently put the sachet back into his clothes. He was silent for a moment. Then he looked into Tang Xiaowen's eyes and spoke slowly. That day, it was indeed Tang Tan and I who went to the art exhibition in Haicheng. Headmaster. Lian Shou walked into the principal's office under the light, holding a piece of completed information in his hand. He placed the information on the table and knocked on the table. Sha Wu, who was sleeping with his eyes closed while sitting at the table, suddenly woke up and looked around sleepily. Is dinner ready? It's already night, where can I get food for you? Lian Shou sighed helplessly. Principal, your condition has really gotten worse and worse in the past 2 years. It's you, Lian Shou. Only then did Sha Wu see the person in front of him clearly, and rubbed his face vigorously to wake himself up a little. Why are you here? Haven't you retired and gone home? You called me back, have you forgotten? Lian Shou was surprisingly patient in front of the principal. At this time, the sunglasses on his face had long been taken off, and his eyes under the sunglasses were extremely deep, giving him the feeling of a middle-aged melancholic uncle. Oh, yes, it seems that there is such a thing. Sha Wu nodded suddenly, as if he recalled something. Alas, Lian Shou sighed lightly and pushed the report in front of Sha Wu. This is my analysis report on this new student life. It's all here. I also conducted corresponding tests on the 4 students you asked me to focus on. Oh, well done. Sha Wu showed a smile, grabbed the report in front of him and read it. Tell me about it, what is your conclusion? Yes. Lian Shou stood up respectfully and began to speak calmly. According to my observations and comparisons, the quality of this freshman class should be the best in 15 years. After my screening, there are now a total of 48 freshmen who have passed the test, and they all have strong potential. The most concerning of them, and the ones you asked me to focus on, are 4 people. He cleared his throat and started telling the main points. First of all, among the new students, Lan has the highest ability level and possesses SS level abilities. My assessment of him is helpless. He is extremely talented and has special abilities, and he is also very good at developing his own abilities. In the first trial I arranged, he climbed to the top of the mountain in only half a minute. His strength is outstanding. Just from the perspective of ability development, he will definitely become an extraordinary void hunter in the future. But there seems to be some problems with his personality. He is extremely withdrawn and seems to hate fighting. During the second trial, he recognized my intention very early, but had no intention of attacking me. He just waited silently for the test to end. I came to the conclusion that psychological counseling must be provided as early as possible, and the reasons for his aversion to fighting must be investigated clearly before he can be guided to become a hunter. But once he can solve this problem, he will definitely be extremely powerful in the future. Sha Wu nodded slightly, picked up the information about An Lan in his hand, and put it aside. Lian Shou continued to narrate. Next is the young master from the Qin family in the capital, Qinzi. My assessment of him is perfect. In the first test, he helped his teammates many times regardless of energy loss. As a person, he is good at uniting people and is an excellent leader. And he has a good heart and is willing to stand up for others. He tried to stop me in the second test. His strategy and intelligence are very high, and his mastery of abilities is also very good. If calculated based on the overall score, he should be ranked first among the freshmen this time. However, his excessively kind character may make it difficult for him to make choices when faced with threats. He paused and his expression became a little more serious. Next, there are two people who I think are the most unstable in this test. One is Zhou Li. My assessment of him is uncontrollable. According to the data, the abilities he masters are extremely dangerous, and for some reasons, he awakened his abilities early when he was 4 years old. In other words, his personality has been affected by his ability since he was a child, and it has been very distorted. His sudden burst of ability once destroyed an entire kindergarten. Although no casualties were caused, the danger brought him to the attention of the government, and he was sent to a prison for education and supervision since he was a child. During this process, he caused a lot of trouble, but he was released based on his extremely high academic performance and the assessment that he could return to society. The reason why he came to the academy this time is also because of the request from the prison camp and the invitation from the principal. This child has a chaotic personality. There is no distinction between good and evil in his eyes. If left alone, he may cause danger to society. Sha Wu looked at the information in his hand and smiled lightly. You know, if those guys from the Void Demon Council find him, the consequences will be disastrous. That's why that old friend asked me to accept this child and guide him properly. If he can be guided properly, he will definitely become an excellent void hunter in the future. Yes, Lian Shou nodded, so I conducted some tests on him. My evaluation of him is, he has a flawed character, it is difficult to distinguish between good and evil, and he only does things based on his own preferences. But his IQ and combat prowess are both top-notch. It would be a pity to give up on him just now. So I didn't eliminate him, I kept him. I think that if you want to guide him properly or use this sword, there must be a scabbard to restrict it. Well, I will seriously consider this child's matter. Sha Wu nodded slightly. After finishing talking about Zhou Li, Lian Shou's expression became slightly more serious. The only person left who is unstable is that D-level guy, Shu Yi. With all due respect, his IQ and mind are at least among the top 3 among all the people I have seen. Just relying on D-level abilities has forced me into desperate situations several times. If his ability is a level or above, I can hardly imagine what kind of trouble he will cause. But that's not the problem. Even if his ability level is not high, he can definitely develop in the direction of physical skills to make up for the gap in combat power. During the test, he cooperated with others several times, or sacrificed his life to save others. He even cancelled the energy in the final battle to prevent me from being hurt. Although from an action perspective, every goodwill he showed was purposeful. But judging from the results, he is indeed helping people or saving people. Compared to Qinzi, he will not be indecisive, nor will he be imprisoned by kindness, and he can better understand the essence of things. Isn't this great? Sha Wudin said with a smile. Essentially, this child has his own sense of justice. Yes, judging from these circumstances, he does have his own gentleness and kindness. Lian Shou nodded slightly, but he frowned slightly and expressed the uneasiness he felt in his heart. I can vaguely feel it. There seems to be a lot of darkness in this child's heart. I'm worried that one day in the future, he will be stimulated by something and fall into darkness. So my assessment of him is an extremely dangerous double-edged sword. Double-edged sword. Sha Wu showed interest. That's right. Lian Shou stated his judgment straightforwardly. I tell the truth. What if one day in the future, when he becomes stronger, this dark side will be activated. With his ability, it is possible to destroy the world. But you still let him pass the test. Sha Wu looked directly at Lien Shou. This means that you still believe in him. Yes, Lien Shou nodded. Since 3 years ago, the frequency of invasions by virtual demons has increased. The number of void hunters who have died has doubled in the past 2 years. For the Dragon Kingdom, what we need more than that uncertainty is strong combat power. And, he hesitated for a moment, then calmly said, for my personal selfishness. I think this kid has a light in his heart. Maybe in the future, this light will become his limiter, suppressing his dark side in his heart. Very good. Sha Wu nodded slightly. At this time, he had read all the 48 reports in his hand. I trust your judgment, Instructor Lien. He raised his head slightly and looked at Lien Shou. I will give you full authority regarding the guidance of these children, and you will be responsible for it. He put the report in his hand to one side. His expression became slightly serious at this moment, and a bit of the principal's temperament finally appeared in his body. Then we can talk about personal matters. About that matter, Cao Sha should have mentioned it to you when he picked you up at the airport. What's your answer? Lien Shou's expression was also a bit solemn. He looked directly into Sha Wu's eyes and said calmly, are you referring to the matter of letting me succeed as the defender of Jincheng? Since the virtual demon was driven out of the Dragon Kingdom by Teodi, the layout of the Dragon Kingdom has been greatly changed due to years of battles and disasters. After merging a large number of cities, there were only 50 large cities left in the Dragon Kingdom. In these cities, there is a city defender who is at the peak level and above. They are the highest fighting force in the city and are responsible for protecting the entire city. That's right, Sha Wu nodded. This position has been vacant for a long time since the last defender of Jincheng Baomian died 3 years ago. The selection of city defenders is very strict. So far, there are only a few qualified void hunters. Although you have retired for a few years, no one can question your strength and qualifications. If it were you, serving as the city guard, no one else would have any objections. And the status of city defender is also very suitable for your life after retirement. I refuse. Lien Shou interrupted Sha Wu without hesitation. His eyes were fixed, he shook his head with a wry smile, and forcefully pulled off his shirt. All he saw was a huge scar that penetrated deep into his bone marrow and nearly tore his entire body, extending from his abdomen to his shoulders. The wound was so deep, it's hard to imagine how he survived. I am someone who saved half my life from the edge of hell, he said calmly, with a hint of desolation in his eyes. From that day on, my level has stagnated and even continued to decline. Now I can't even maintain the peak level. You ask me to shoulder the safety of a city. I simply can't afford it. Coming back to coach this time is the last remaining energy I can use. The treatment in recent years has allowed me to see my condition clearly. His expression dimmed. Ghost Doctor told me that it is impossible for me to recover. Sha Wu looked at Lien Shou quietly, with a hint of lament in his eyes. So after this coaching, I will go to the virtual realm and strive to die in battle. Lien Shou raised his head again, extremely calm, as if he had already made his decision. I'm sorry, Principal, you know my character. I can't accept being a city defender and surviving the rest of my life by chance. Okay, I understand. Sha Wu closed his eyes gently and spoke calmly. He was silent for a moment, then waved his hand, you should retreat first. From the depths of his eyes, Lien Shou saw a hint of sadness. He sighed softly in his heart, but he understood very well how much Sha Wu had endured. Lien Shou bowed solemnly to Sha Wu, turned and left. But before he had taken 2 steps, he suddenly stopped and turned around. Principal, is it because you suppressed that thing in the past 2 years that you became like this? Sha Wu's eyes flashed, but quickly subsided. It seems you have guessed it. He looked out the window quietly and said calmly, that thing has been rioting since the past 2 years. In recent times, the frequency of its riots has become more and more frequent, and it has indeed consumed a lot of my energy. But, he suddenly stood up and walked to the window, quietly overlooking Longxia College from the principal's room. An inexplicable aura filled the air from his body. At this moment, he opened his eyes gently like a dragon that had been sleeping for a long time. His voice was low, and he said lightly in an extremely domineering tone, "As long as I am here for one day. It's impossible for it to come out. It will be suppressed by me for the rest of its life, and it won't be able to make any waves." A smile appeared on Lien Shou's face, and his expression became a little more respectful again. He saluted, turned around, and exited the door. When he reached the door, he opened his mouth and said, "That's right. As for the entrance examination in 9 days, I have already chosen the location. If possible, please ask the principal to go and say hello to the city defenders over there in advance." Shu Yi looked at Tang Xiaowen, who was crying uncontrollably in front of him and couldn't help but fell silent. Tang Tan had told him more than once how much she valued her sister. If she learns the real cause of Tang Tan's death, how disappointed will she be with Hunter Shu? Therefore, in his narration, he only mentioned that Tang Tan died saving others, but did not mention the few hunters who took advantage of her. "I did promise your sister that I would take care of you a little. This is just a promise, you don't have to take it too seriously." He looked at Tang Xiaowen, whose pear blossoms were covered with rain, and he hesitated for a moment before comforting him. "You should know that the person she cares about most is you. She was still worried about you until she died. But I couldn't even see my sister's body," Tang Xiaowen said while sobbing, feeling extremely depressed. Shu Yi was silent. Perhaps because the scene was too cruel and related to virtual beasts, the hospital chose to directly cremate the body without leaving the body. He was about to say something else, but Tang Xiaowen's words made him freeze in place as if struck by lightning. "I asked the hospital and they told me that my sister's body could not be found. The last thing I was notified of was a death report." "Wait a minute." Shu Yi stood up suddenly, his expression becoming extremely excited. "What did you say? You just said that your sister's body was not found in the hospital." Shu Yi's usually calm expression was a little out of control at this moment. He grabbed Tang Xiaowen's shoulder with force, causing the latter to feel a burst of pain and let out a soft sigh. As if aware of his gaffe, Shu Yi let go of his hands and looked directly at Tang Xiaowen. Tang Xiaowen seemed to be frightened and nodded timidly. "Yes, they told me that my sister's body was not sent to the hospital. Their explanation is that the art exhibition building collapsed, causing numerous casualties. In addition to my sister, many people died there. Not just my sister, but the remains of many people have disappeared. It's just that I think the matter may not be that simple, so I have been investigating this matter over the years." "No, this is wrong." Shu Yi touched his chin, and his whole mood became very intense. Almost all those whose bodies disappeared were directly swallowed by the original void beast, and their bodies were not preserved. But Tang Tan was different. Although half of her body was bitten off and she quickly lost her life, at least her body existed. The most important point is that Shu Yi watched helplessly as the medical staff appeared and took Tang Tan's body away. If this is the case, as Tang Tan's biological sister, it is impossible for Tang Xiaowen not to see her body. There is definitely something wrong with this. Sweat broke out on Shu Yi's forehead, and the memory palace in his mind rotated rapidly. The scene that he remembered deeply 3 years ago turned into a rapidly rotating film, and scenes passed before his eyes. This incident hit him so hard that he never wanted to think about it. In addition, he was in a state of extreme emotional control at the time, and it seemed that many details of the scene were ignored by him. He originally thought that Tang Tan's body would be taken away by the hospital and would be cremated and buried normally. But now it seems that there is a big problem in some link. Why did an ambulance show up so soon after the battle? Why is there only one ambulance? There were so many injured and dead. Tang Tan's body was moved away by them. In Shu Yi's memory screen, several people in white medical uniforms flashed. Wearing masks, they got out of the ambulance, briefly dealt with the condition of the injured at the scene, and then began to move the bodies. Shu also watched helplessly as they took Tang Tan's body away. According to the medical staff, they were among the ambulances that arrived first, and the rest of the ambulances were still behind. But now that I think about it, this is completely unreasonable. The location of the art exhibition is in the outskirts of Haicheng, and it takes at least 20 minutes to drive from the nearest hospital there. But after the group of void hunters killed the void beast, less than 10 minutes later, this ambulance appeared there. If someone called the hospital, how could only one car come when there were so many injured? Drops of sweat streaked across Shu Yi's cheeks. His expression was so gloomy that he seemed to be dripping with water. His breathing was rapid, and his eyes seemed to be shooting out flames. Countless clues were quickly pieced together in my mind. After a moment, an incredible conclusion jumped out to him. The ambulance at that time was not sent by the hospital. Close black lens bracket. How could this happen? Who are they? What is their purpose? And why did they take Tang Tan's body away? Shu Yi bit his lips tightly, countless questions and confusion surging in his mind. He desperately wanted to know the answer, and his whole body seemed to be on the verge of losing control. Shu Yi, what's wrong with you? Tang Xiaowen was frightened by the expression on Shu Yi's face. He couldn't help but take a few steps back and looked at him nervously. Are you really sure that the hospital told you that it had never seen your sister's body? Shu Yi suddenly spoke and looked directly at Tang Xiaowen. He had a temperament that Tang Xiaowen had never seen before. This cold, domineering and indifferent temperament made her feel a little scared. Yes. Yes. Tang Xiaowen responded in a low voice. At that time, I was notified by the hospital of the death of my sister, and I rushed to Haicheng very quickly. They told me that a building collapsed at the art exhibition where my sister was, and she was buried in the building. No body was found. I know. Shu Yi's temperament suddenly dropped, and his face was expressionless, making it impossible to guess what he was thinking. I will definitely investigate this matter clearly. He ended the topic very calmly, not knowing what he was thinking about, but his clenched fist seemed to still be telling his messy heart. Did something happen before my sister died? Tang Xiaowen was not stupid. She quickly caught the hidden meaning in Shu Yi's words. When her sister was involved, she immediately became anxious. Is there something hidden about what happened back then? Sister, this matter has nothing to do with you. Shu Yi interrupted Tang Xiaowen's words in an extremely domineering manner. How could it have nothing to do with me? That's my sister. Tang Xiaowen, who had always been gentle, became excited at this time. You should tell me what happened. Is there something you didn't tell me? Tang Xiaowen. Shu Yi approached Tang Xiaowen in an instant. Their eyes met, and the distance between them was only 10 centimeters. His eyes were full of coldness at this moment, and he said word by word, I will help you solve some things because of your sister's request before she died. The reason why I don't want to tell you these things is because she doesn't want you to do something meaningless because of her. She doesn't want you to be in danger, and she doesn't want you to live for her by inheriting her last wish. You enter Longxia Academy to study, it is your personal will, I have no control over it. But I have to warn you. If it's because your sister wants to become a hollow hunter, so you want to realize her dream for her, I advise you to think carefully about whether this is what you want to do. As for your sister's matter, I will investigate it. I have no responsibility or obligation to tell you what happened. You just need to be your obedient student here and study hard. Do you understand? Tang Xiaowen pursed his lips tightly, tears welling up in his eyes, as if he was frightened by Shu Yi's attitude. But her eyes were full of stubbornness, staring at Shu Yi with a little grievance. Shu Yi took a step back, glanced at Tang Xiaowen lightly, and walked towards the house without looking back. He walked straight to the door of a bedroom on the first floor and prepared to push the door open and enter. Tang Xiaowen's voice came from behind, That's my bedroom. Shu Yi's movements suddenly stagnated, his body trembled, and he let go of the door handle, seeming a little embarrassed. He said without looking back, Don't you live on the second floor? I just went up to take a look. The awkward atmosphere spread slightly. Shu Yi retracted his hand and walked up to the second floor without looking back, Then I'll live on the second floor. With calm eyes, he pushed away the bedroom and walked in. A thought quickly flashed through his mind. It seems a bit embarrassing. Early morning. Shu Yi yawned and walked out of the room, with a sense of exhaustion in his whole body. After briefly washing up, he walked down the stairs and saw Tang Xiaowen, neatly dressed, walking out of the kitchen on the first floor. The two looked at each other, and then quickly moved away from each other. The quarrel last night made the atmosphere between them slightly awkward. Tang Xiaowen held 2 plates and placed them in front of him. There were 2 slices of bread on the plate, which seemed to be her breakfast. She glanced at Shu Yi, who came down from upstairs, silently pushed the plate to the other end of the table, and said in a calm voice, This is yours. Shu Yi also understood in his heart that the two of them were now like roommates living together. After all, if the relationship is too rigid, the two of them will feel very uncomfortable. So he borrowed Po Shaw's donkey, sat at the other end of the dining table, picked up the bread, and asked in a speechless tone, "Did you make this?" "Yeah," Tang Xiaowen responded lightly and began to eat the bread in front of him. Shu Yi shrugged his shoulders. The way he spoke to her last night would make anyone a little angry. He picked up the bread on the plate nonchalantly and took a casual bite. The next second, his expression froze in place, and his whole face turned blue. This feeling is like eating ginger in potato fried rice, sour and refreshing. Shu Yi swallowed the bread in his mouth with great difficulty and said, "Did you poison the bread?" Tang Xiaowen frowned slightly and suddenly became angry. "I kindly made you a breakfast, but you actually suspect me of poisoning." Shu Yi observed her expression, and it didn't seem like she was deliberately teasing him. He twitched the corners of his mouth and continued to ask, "Is your bread the same as mine? Otherwise, I don't know what flavor you like to eat." Tang Xiaowen puffed up his mouth and responded. Shu Yi had a strange expression, looking at her from a distance, and asked tentatively, "Let me take the liberty to ask you, what did you add to the bread?" Tang Xiaowen frowned and thought for a moment before replying, "I added cucumber, bitter melon, beef, and pepper. To adjust the taste, I also added some vinegar and soy sauce." As she spoke, she ate the bread on her plate without feeling anything strange about her food. Shu Yi was silent for a long time, and finally couldn't hold it back. "Did your sister never let you into the kitchen when you were at home before?" "How do you know?" Tang Xiaowen was a little surprised. "My sister said she was afraid of affecting my study, so she never let me cook." Quote. Shu Yi looked at the remaining bread on the plate, like a soldier rushing to the battlefield. He closed his eyes tightly and swallowed it hard without chewing it. Then, he stood up directly and looked at Tang Xiaowen seriously. "If possible, I hope you will not enter the kitchen again." At this moment, he wanted to say to Tang Xiaowen, "Well done, don't do it next time." His whole face was a little blue at the moment, and the indescribable taste was washing over his mouth and taste buds. "There is a theory class today, I will go to the classroom first." He endured the weird feeling, walked straight to the door of the villa, opened the door and went out. Just when he was about to leave, Tang Xiaowen suddenly stood up and shouted to him, "About sister. Even if you don't want to tell me, I will investigate it in my own way. That's my sister. I must know the truth. You can't stop me." Her eyes were firm and she was not affected by Shu Yi's words yesterday. Shu Yi paused, then walked out of the door and disappeared. "As you wish." Hey, Teacher Lianshou, long time no see. In Longxia Academy, a middle-aged man with slicked back hair suddenly lit up when he saw Lianshou coming from the other end. "Oh, it's you, Teacher Qi." Lianshou raised his eyebrows and smiled. A few years ago, when he was still working at Longxia College, he also met many teachers. The person in front of him is one of his acquaintances. Although his level is not high, he possesses very profound knowledge of energy theory and has also conducted in-depth research on abilities. "We haven't seen each other since you suddenly resigned and retired a few years ago." Teacher Qi's eyes flashed with excitement that he hadn't seen for a long time. "I heard you were back 2 days ago, and I thought they were joking with me." What happened in the past few years?" "It's nothing, it's just something wrong with my body." Lianshou shook his head indifferently and did not mention his own situation. He looked at Teacher Qi in front of him, suddenly thought of something, and asked curiously, "Are you going to teach?" "Yes, they are the batch of freshmen you just finished testing yesterday." Teacher Qi responded with a smile, "I am going to give them their first theory class now. Teach them some basic energy theory knowledge by the way." Lianshou's expression suddenly became strange. He did not expect that this batch of new students would actually be this old friend attending class. "Do you still plan to use the same teaching method as before?" "That's right." Teacher Qi nodded, with a smile on his lips. "These little guys who have just entered school are all very ambitious. Only this set of methods can establish their authority and make them feel awe and prevent them from becoming arrogant." Lianshou looked strange and fumbled in his pocket for a long time, then took out something and stuffed it into Teacher Qi's hand. "Then I think you might need this." "What is this?" Teacher Qi was stunned for a moment, then looked down. "Stress mirror." He recognized the name of the disposable jewelry and showed a confused expression. Why did you give me this? Lian Shou patted him on the shoulder and said meaningfully, let me remind you in advance that there is a big gap between this group of students and previous students. According to my judgment, they should be the most outstanding group of students in the past 15 years. Haha, they are just a group of little guys from the stone realm. Teacher Qi smiled nonchalantly. Which of the students who can enter Longxia College is not a genius? If I have to use that stress mirror to protect myself against them, then you would be looking down on me too much. Although my fighting ability is definitely not as good as yours, Mr. Lian Shou, my fighting experience is definitely much better than that group of brats who just entered school. Don't say that. Lian Shou suppressed a smile and shrugged. Just think of it as a gift for our reunion. That's it, class is about to begin. You go to the classroom quickly. I'll leave first. Teacher Qi held the square mirror in his hand and watched Lian Shou leave with confusion on his face, and couldn't help scratching his head. Teacher Lian Shou, you are still as weird as before. He smiled lightly and shook his head, then put the stress mirror in his arms. Let me see how good the freshmen who were rated as excellent by Teacher Lian Shou are. In a spacious classroom, Xu Yi sat casually on a chair, yawned and looked around. At this time, more than half of the students in the classroom were already sitting, all of whom had successfully passed yesterday's second test. They communicated with each other with excitement on their faces, and they were still excited about being able to join Longxia Academy. After a while, other students came from the door one after another. Tang Xiaowen was also among the crowd. After she entered the classroom, she quickly noticed Xu Yi's position. But she just turned her head awkwardly and found a seat far away to sit down. Hey, Xu Yi, Bai Dao's voice came from the side. He appeared out of nowhere and sat directly next to Xu Yi. I checked for you what you asked me about yesterday. Over the years, all the missions completed by the Void Hunters, as well as the records of the Void Beasts and Void Demons hunted, have been stored in paper form in the confidential archives of the school's intelligence department. Of course, the detailed records of XUXU hunters or XUXU hunting teams from other colleges are also stored in their respective colleges. In addition, brief information about this intelligence will also be uploaded to the database in the form of indexes and brief introductions. The databases of the 10 schools are interconnected and stored in the country's special database. If you want to use this information, you must have extremely high status and qualifications. He spoke very fast, and he didn't know where he got the information from, but he spoke it clearly and clearly. Although he didn't understand why Xu Yi contacted him in the middle of the night yesterday to ask these questions, he quickly found the answer for Xu Yi. Yes, I understand. Xu Yi nodded calmly, with fatigue between his brows. He suddenly thought of something and asked again, is this special database of the country usually maintained by real people? Yes, Bai Dao nodded, because the 10 schools are interconnected, it cannot open an internet or LAN, so we can only use the most advanced firewalls and cooperate with specialized maintenance personnel to prevent intelligence leaks. Tisk, no wonder, Xu Yi said to himself and sighed in displeasure. Bai Dao suddenly showed a curious look, lowered his voice and asked, why are you suddenly interested in this? Is there something you want to investigate? Xu Yi didn't want to answer his question. Just as he was about to find a reason to change the subject, the door to the classroom was pushed open. A middle-aged man with slicked back hair walked in leisurely. Judging from his clothes and nameplate, this was the teacher of their energy and ability development class. Seeing the teacher appear, the students who were whispering in the classroom stopped communicating and became quiet. In the previous entrance test, Lian Shou had left a very deep impression on them. Therefore, almost no one was late for this theoretical class, and everyone was seated in the classroom. Bai Dao also stopped asking, scratched his head and sat upright. Today, I will teach you the theory lesson of energy and ability development. My name is Qi Fu, I hope we can get along well. Qi Fu looked around at the group of freshmen in the classroom, grinned, and briefly introduced himself. Then he stopped talking and went straight to the point, writing on the blackboard behind him. Everyone should know that since the disaster day 300 years ago, newborn babies among humans have begun to give birth to awakened ones. According to Dragon Kingdom's database, So far, about 48% of people have been able to awaken their abilities on the awakening day and become awakened ones. He drew a circle at 48% and then drew several lines. Among the 48% of awakened people, about 80% have only been born with D-level abilities, and most of them have no direct combat effectiveness. They are like ordinary people with some kind of special ability. They basically have no fighting talent, and they cannot understand the way energy operates. They will have difficulty breaking through the stone realm throughout their lives. Most of them are engaged in ordinary jobs or do some intelligence analysis, career. Only a very few D-level ability users can develop their own abilities and make up for it in other ways, becoming void hunters with some combat power. The other 20% of awakened ones have awakened abilities above sea level. As long as they develop their abilities reasonably and have enough faith, they will have the opportunity to become void hunters. But once you become a hunter, you have to bear a huge risk of death. Not only do they have to enter and exit the major virtual realms, they also have to stop some virtual beasts and virtual demons that escape from the virtual realm and try to cause destruction. Therefore, the number of virtual hunters in the country has always been in relatively short supply. The major hunting teams and hunters have to travel around almost all year round, dealing with various incidents and virtual realms that appear randomly throughout the country. He stopped writing on the blackboard and turned to look at everyone who joins Longxia Academy. Most of them should have the goal of becoming a void hunter. So I want to ask you a question. What do you think is the most important condition in our battle with the void beast and void demon? The red-haired Han Hao immediately raised his hand with a proud face. Teacher, I think it depends on high-level abilities. Chi Fu shook his head and smiled, then turned around and wrote on the blackboard. Since the disaster day, people with abilities have been born continuously. In the process of resisting the virtual demon, we humans have begun to focus on studying the abilities and awakened people born. During this process, the government not only divided the levels of all capabilities that were born, but also made new annotations for these capabilities and divided them into types. He formed 6 lines on the blackboard one after another and introduced all the abilities so far. There are 6 types. Time and space guidance, rule destruction, domain laws, material amplification, spiritual influence and energy transformation. That is to say, the abilities you master can be divided into these 6 types according to the nature of the abilities. And the names of your abilities are all named by the first holder of this ability. According to information and data, except for D-level abilities, for all abilities of A level and above, there will only be one holder at the same time. Unless the previous holder dies, a second identical ability will almost never appear. He paused, looked around at the freshmen in the classroom, and spoke again. The levels of abilities can be divided to a certain extent using ability stones. The higher the level, the rarer the ability, and the stronger it is from an objective point of view. But, he prolonged his tone and glanced at Han Hao with a hint of meaning. The first lesson I want to teach you today is to never judge the strength of an awakened person by his ability level. If you don't keep this in mind, you will definitely suffer in the future. Han Hao frowned unhappily. He felt a little dissatisfied with Chi Fu's words. The higher the ability level, both the power and the effect are far greater than those of low levels. He could never forget the way other people looked at him after he awakened his S-level abilities on the awakening day. Maybe some of you can't understand what I mean. Chi Fu noticed Han Hao's expression, just smiled lightly and continued to read. But let me give you an example. He quickly wrote a few words on the blackboard. C-level ability, Spirit Breaking Thread. This is an ability mastered by a former void hunter. Its effect is very simple. It is able to use both hands to pull out a transparent silk thread that cannot be worn or destroyed. This wire can be connected anywhere, and has the effect of breaking energy. In terms of effects alone, this ability is absolutely powerful, and its characteristics are also very unique. But the reason why it is only a C-level ability is also very simple. There are many restrictions when it is used. He drew 3 circles behind the ability and connected them with lines. One is the length. When the former void hunter was still in the rock realm, the longest line he could pull out was only 1 meter. The second is the release method. When using his ability, he must use his hands to create the soul-breaking thread, which cannot be generated out of thin air at any location. The third is duration. The spirit-breaking threads he arranged, when he was in the rock realm, each thread would lose its characteristics and disappear after lasting for up to half an hour. Then isn't this ability completely useless? Han Hao chuckled and expressed his doubts. Even if his thread can break through energy, in battle, this ability can't touch others at all. Compared with the S-level abilities he has mastered, this C-level ability is extremely weak. Chi Fu just smiled slightly and said calmly, but this Void Hunter, through his own ability, killed a Peak Realm Void Demon by himself when he was in the Rock Realm. What? How is this possible? Han Hao exclaimed. Not only him, but many students in the classroom were in commotion, a little unbelievable. Can anyone guess how he did it? Chi Fu smiled but didn't answer, just posing a question. The effect of his ability can break through energy, which means it has the effect of ignoring energy and protecting the body. A gentle and elegant voice sounded from one side. Qin Zi gave his guess almost as soon as Chi Fu asked the question. He pushed his frame slightly and continued, even a virtual demon in the Peak Realm will have a hard time resisting the damage caused by some abilities without energy protection. As long as the spirit-breaking thread is placed at a suitable location in advance during the duration of the ability, and with the help of some inducements and its transparent characteristics, there is a high chance of causing fatal damage to the virtual demon. That's right. Chi Fu's eyes lit up and he cast an approving glance at Qin Zi. The Void Hunter has a very high IQ. He predicted in advance where the Void Demon might appear. So before the virtual demon appeared, he laid out the spirit-breaking thread in advance and took advantage of the poor visibility conditions at night to successfully ambush the high-speed moving virtual demon. Even though the virtual demon possesses peak-level strength, he touched the soul-breaking thread while moving at high speed. His protective energy was broken by the thread, his body and head were separated on the spot, and he was killed by an opponent who was far weaker than himself. This real case made the students present brighten their eyes and take a breath of cold air. Han Hao was slightly stunned and touched his head. He had no idea that such a weak ability could be so effective. But he was still a little dissatisfied, thinking that this case was overwhelmingly coincidental. The higher the ability level, the stronger the ability, but it does not mean that the awakened person is powerful. Chi Fu looked at the thinking expressions of everyone and smiled slightly. So, in your future battles, you must not underestimate any awakened person. Combat experience, physical skills level, ability development, IQ level. When it comes to combat, there are many factors involved, and a person's strength cannot be judged by one factor. And your development of abilities and improvement of your own energy realm will also bring about earth-shaking changes in your abilities. He quickly wrote down the energy realms of stone, rock, mountain, peak, and ridge on the blackboard. Every time your energy realm improves, your abilities will change. Let's take that spirit-breaking thread just now as an example. When this ability is in the rock realm, it is only 1 meter long and can only last half an hour. But when he ascends to the mountain level, the length can reach 3 meters, and the maintenance time will also increase to 1 hour. Shu Yi listened carefully to Chi Fu's introduction and suddenly became thoughtful. The relationship between ability level and ability realm can basically be understood as innate talent and acquired efforts. For example, the boiling blood he has mastered can only improve his overall fitness by twice as long as it is a D-level ability. But at that time, he raised the boiling blood to the SS level through fading, and the effect was 5 times greater, and he also mastered the ability of the blood face. If his realm at that time was the rock realm, perhaps the SS level boiling blood could increase the level by 10 times. D-level boiling blood may only reach 4 times. Although in comparison, the increase in SS level abilities is much greater than that of low-level abilities. However, the energy consumption of D-level abilities when used, as well as the low consumption characteristics, can also make up for part of the lack of strength. Coupled with acquired efforts and the improvement of one's own realm, low-level abilities may not be inferior to high-level abilities. Fortunately, above level A, there won't be 2 types of the same ability. And Shu can also use natural selection to forcibly upgrade his skill level, which is also unique. The Void Hunter unfortunately died in battle when he was in the mountain realm. Chi Fu's voice continued to come. But based on the technical department's analysis of his abilities, it can be roughly inferred that when he breaks through to the peak realm, this range and distance will be even longer. The peak realm and the ridge realm are extremely difficult hurdles for all ability users to overcome. He drew a circle between the peaks. Based on current data and information, once an awakened person steps into the Ridge realm, the nature of his abilities will undergo earth-shaking changes. For example, regarding that spirit-breaking thread, the technical department had a rough estimate of the capabilities of the Ridge realm. Perhaps when its owner reaches the Ridge realm, each soul-breaking thread will have the property of cutting off all things. When that time comes, the gap between ability levels will be much narrower. His few simple words immediately made all the students think wildly, imagining the changes in their abilities when they reached the Ling realm. Chi Fu looked at the students under the podium, slightly curved his mouth, and suddenly said, "After what I just said, I think you should have a deeper understanding of abilities." But many students may still have the idea that the higher their ability level, the stronger they are. So in order to allow you to experience the content of this class more directly, in the second half of the class, I will personally let you experience why ability levels cannot be used to determine the strength of strength. Everyone get up and join me. We will conduct the rest of the course at the training ground. A huge training ground. Under the leadership of Chi Fu, a group of students stood there groaning and looking around curiously. Not only is it very spacious, the ground is made of light blue stones, which looks very valuable. There are many targets and training dummies placed around the ground, allowing people to conduct various combat training. At the other end of the training ground, there are two teachers who are conducting combat training. For a while, the students were very curious about how Chi Fu wanted to give them an experience. Chi Fu came to the front of the crowd with a faint smile and suddenly waved his right hand. A faint energy surged in his palm, and his voice came out. To tell you the truth, the level of abilities I possess is actually not high. The C-level ability, Second Punch, is a material amplification type of ability. The effect is that every time I attack, it will cause 2 damage. It is very simple and direct. As he spoke, he punched the training dummy next to him. The energy wave burst out with a bang, and the entire body of the training dummy suddenly fell backwards. Its feet were firmly fixed on the ground, and its curved body bounced back like a tumbler. But before it could fully bounce up, another inexplicable force erupted in its body. The powerful momentum caused the dummy to fly out with a bang, stirring up a cloud of dust. Such movement immediately attracted the attention of 2 teachers in the distance. They stopped and looked over from a distance of several hundred meters. "Hey, isn't that Lao Chi? Is he teaching new students?" One of the teachers wearing glasses raised his eyebrows and recognized Chi Fu. "Yes, you haven't heard that this group of students just entered school yesterday and instructor Lien Shou, who disappeared for several years, came back to conduct the test himself." The teacher beside him nodded. "Ha ha ha, this guy, Lao Chi, wants to use the same old method to intimidate the freshmen again." The teacher wearing glasses suddenly laughed out loud, thinking of Chi Fu's tried and tested method. His old method does work. At least every time it ends, the freshmen will be in awe of him. The teacher next to him also responded with a smile, "But I heard that the freshmen's level this time is pretty good, so there shouldn't be any problems." "What's wrong?" "Don't worry, although that guy Lao Chi's ability level is not high, his strength is obvious to all. He is a top combat genius and theoretical genius." The glasses teacher smiled and shook his head. "Those freshmen are just newborn calves, what kind of trouble can they make?" "Okay, let's withdraw. I think Lao Chi will brag with us again tonight." This is the effect. Chi Fu retracted his fist, and the energy fluctuations on his body began to emerge. "My current realm is the mountain realm. But next, I will firmly limit my energy to the stone realm, just like you." As he spoke, the energy fluctuated and dropped inch by inch. Then, he put his hands behind his back and said confidently, "I think if you can enter Longxia Academy, your ability level should be B level or above. There are even A class and S class ones. But I am going to confirm my previous theory for you today. Even if I am in the same realm as you, my ability level is lower than yours, and I inform you of the effects of my abilities. If we fight, you will never be my opponent." As soon as this statement came out, there was an uproar among the crowd. Everyone present is the pride of heaven, far beyond their peers. Their ability levels are also higher than sea level. Now this teacher Chi actually dares to speak out wildly, thinking that they are no match for him in the same realm. Suddenly, all the students were full of fighting spirit. gearing up and eager to give it a try. These expressions were all caught in his eyes, but they were already commonplace. Almost every new student he teaches every year has the same expression as now. But after the course is over, they will have nothing but awe in their eyes. It seems like you don't believe it. Chi Fu hummed and walked directly towards the crowd. In that case, I will just find a few people to demonstrate it. His eyes brightened, and he quickly found the tallest person among the crowd. The so-called knocking on the mountain shakes the tiger. Defeating the seemingly strongest person among this group of students will definitely give them a huge impact. He stopped in front of a tall, muscular but shirtless student and smiled lightly. You look like you can fight well. It's up to you. Please play as you like and let's have a brief discussion. After saying this, he turned around and came to the middle of the field. You want to fight me? Jolie grinned when his name was called and looked at Chi Fu in front of him with a strange expression on his face. Chi Fu turned his head and looked. Why, don't you have confidence? Don't worry, I will keep my hands appropriately and won't let you get hurt. Of course not. Jolie pushed away the crowd and walked straight towards the middle of the field. A few seconds later, he came to Chi Fu and looked down condescendingly. I'm just afraid that I'll beat you to death accidentally. There was no respect in his eyes, as if he didn't care whether Chi Fu was a teacher or not. The old man has threatened me. I can't kill people casually. Otherwise, I will be locked up back in that dark, damp, shabby place where birds don't poop. You said you, daughter, afraid of beating me to death. Chi Fu laughed angrily as if he had heard some big joke. He has taught so many students, but this is the first time he has seen such a ignorant and arrogant student. Don't worry, I will let you know the gap between us. He sneered and waved his palm towards Jolie, signaling for him to take action. But Jolie remained unmoved and just touched his nose boredly. You'd better upgrade your realm to the rock realm. With your current realm, you are no match for me. Chi Fu suddenly felt as if he had been underestimated, and his words were slightly angry. You are talking arrogantly. You are not worthy enough for me to improve my realm. Jolie looked at Chi Fu and grinned. Anger is indeed the most easily aroused emotion in people. Are you really sure you want me to make the first move? HMPH. Chi Fu raised his chin, already determined to give this new student some color. You can do whatever you want. Okay. Jolie stopped talking nonsense and blasted out his right fist like a cannonball. I don't like thinking so much. The fist that rushed towards him instantly made all the hair on his body stand on end. With his sense of perception, he actually smelled an extremely dangerous aura from this punch. FK. He took a step back suddenly, and just as he was about to react, he found that the speed of the fist increased several times, and it came to him in an instant. Boom! Terrifying roars sounded from the training ground. The 4 training dummies located more than 10 meters behind Chi Fei were instantly shattered by the fist wind, leaving only a few swaying feet. In an instant, the whole place was silent. Clang! There was a roar. Everyone looked at it. However, he saw a hanging mirror suddenly appeared in front of Chi Fu, blocking Jolie's fist in front of him. His hair was blown back by the wind of the fist, and his fist also hit Jolie's body. Boom! Jolie groaned and trembled slightly. But then, another shock surged from his body, causing him to frown and take a step back to relieve the force. He shook his fists, put his hands in his pockets like a normal person, and walked towards the team without looking back. There should be no need for us to continue fighting. Click! A crisp sound sounded from the front. Chi Fu stared in shock as the mirror in front of him turned into countless fragments and scattered on the ground, and couldn't help but swallow. He didn't expect that the stress mirror Lien Shou gave him would automatically trigger and protect him. If it weren't for the activation of Ju Bao, he might have had to take a punch from Jolie head on. Although this punch could not kill him, as a teacher, if he was beaten away by the students in front of him, how could he have the dignity to teach? He could sense the power of the punch just now extremely clearly. It was not like the destructive power that a student in the stone realm could produce. What shocked him even more was that his desperate counterattack only made Jolie take a step back. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly became a little quiet. The students looked at Jolie like a monster, shocked by his terrifying strength. Others looked at Chi Fu with strange faces and wanted to laugh. Teacher Chi had just said that he would take care of them, but unexpectedly, he was immediately stunned. His so-called theory seems to be empty talk. Chi Fu. His face turned a little blue, and apart from fear, he was also filled with embarrassment. He seemed to understand somewhat what Lian Shou's words meant. There is such a perverted person among these freshmen. He gritted his teeth and looked at the students who were holding back their smiles with slight annoyance. This is his first class and he must not lose face here. At this time, he urgently needed a big victory to save his face. His eyes quickly swept over everyone. He pointed quickly and said in a cold voice, "You, come here." Me. Bai Dao, who was standing next to Shu Yi and laughing, was stunned for a moment and pointed to his nose. "Yes, that's right." Chi Fu nodded. "I think you are the one who laughs the most." "No, teacher, I just thought of happy things." Bai Dao took a step back with vigilance, evading everything. "If you don't come up, I'll deduct some credits from you." Facing Chi Fu's threat, Bai Dao's expression changed drastically. He looked around in an extremely wretched manner, then gritted his teeth and stepped forward helplessly. "Teacher, I think there may be others who are more suitable to discuss with you than me." Bai Dao was smiling, still trying to avoid this discussion. But Chi Fu seemed to recognize him and said lightly, "My current realm and yours are both stone realms. What are you afraid of? I see you smile so happily, you must be as strong as that classmate just now, right?" After saying this, he looked at Bai Dao. "What is your ability level?" Bai Dao touched the back of his head and said with a dry smile, "It's not worth mentioning, it's just a B level ability." "Very good." Chi Fu secretly breathed a sigh of relief in his heart and looked at all the freshmen. "Everyone, please be careful. His ability is B level, and I'm only C level. Both of us are in the stone realm. But I'm going to show you next why I say that ability level cannot determine the outcome of a battle." He looked forward again and said, "You can take action. It's up to you to use your abilities or move however you want." Bai Dao seemed to still be trying to escape, begging with a full face, "Teacher, please let me go, there are so many people here, you have to find." In the middle of his words, he suddenly squatted down and hit Chi Fu with a sweeping kick. This sudden attack stunned the students behind them. Bai Dao took his shamelessness and vulgarity to the extreme. One second he was smiling and trying to escape, but the next second he launched an attack. What the hell? Chi Fu had no idea that Bai Dao could be so sinister. Fortunately, he had rich fighting experience and reacted almost instantly. He directly shifted his center of gravity downwards, squatted down, and struck Bai Dao with a palm. But at the same time as he took action, Bai Dao's movements were extremely smooth, twisting his body in a movement similar to Thomas's pirouette. Immediately, his legs popped out quickly, and a rabbit kicked eagle towards Chi's chest. Fake attack. Chi Fu reacted immediately, but it was too late to dodge. He was kicked in the chest by Bai Dao, and he grunted, but quickly waved his right palm, trying to catch Bai Dao. According to his speed and reaction, Bai Dao would definitely be caught by him before he could retract his legs in time. As long as he can touch his body, he has 100 ways to deal with this extremely wretched new student. But his right palm missed. After a closer look, Bai Dao appeared a few meters away, with a vigilant expression on his face. "Teacher Chi is really powerful, you have actually diffused my whirlwind and invincible thunderbolt legs." What's the whirlwind invincible thunder kick? It's obviously a sneak attack and it even has a name for the move. Chi Fu was shocked on the spot, feeling as if 10,000 horses were running past him. He sneered out of anger, and with one step of his feet, he grabbed Bai Dao. "You're such a good boy. I want to see what other methods you have." He was extremely fast and rushed in front of Chi Fei in an instant. His right fist flew out like thunder. But just when his fist was about to touch Bai Dao, the latter's figure blurred for a while, and he stepped back 3 meters without knowing it, narrowly avoiding Chi Fei's attack. Chi Fu was stunned for a moment, his face full of weirdness. "How did you avoid it? But, maybe it's a coincidence." Bai Dao blinked and his eyes swept back and forth, as if he was always looking for the direction of retreat. Boom! Chi Fu approached with another punch. The punch was extremely fast and made the sound of breaking wind, but it fell into the air again. Bai Dao stood cautiously to the side and blinked at him with an innocent face. Chi Fu didn't believe in evil, and nameless fire suddenly rushed into his heart. He directly followed Bai Dao with his footsteps and punched continuously after chasing Bai Dao like a phantom. Boom 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 boom. His fist speed became faster and faster, almost leaving an afterimage in the air, and the sound of breaking wind sounded one after another. But Bai Dao is like leaves floating in the air. Every time he faced Chi Fu's attack, he was able to dodge his attack, exactly, and dodge away. The two people moved in a circular trajectory, one chasing and the other escaping, and in a short time they made a large circle and returned to the center of the field. Half a minute later, Chi Fu was out of breath and gave up the attack, holding his knees and gasping for air. After so many attacks, he couldn't even touch the corner of Bai Dao's clothes. He stared at Bai Dao with shock on his face. Your ability is a B-level ability, escape. As expected of a teacher, you actually noticed it. Bai Dao pretended to be surprised and showed an expression of admiration. But this expression in Chi Fu's eyes looked like ridicule. He gritted his teeth and said, "You can actually develop your abilities to this extent. Go back to me." Okay. Bai Dao walked towards the crowd. When passing by Chi Fu, the latter's eyes turned cold, and he suddenly punched Bai Dao in the back. But Bai Dao seemed to have eyes on his back. Almost at the same time as he punched, his whole body moved down half a meter. Half of his body was submerged in the earth, and he dodged all the punches with great accuracy. Then, he turned around with an innocent expression on his face. "Teacher, is there anything else you can do?" "No. It's okay." Chi Fu closed his eyes with a look of despair on his face. This student, combined with his abilities and his own development of abilities, has almost become one with his abilities. Even though I was in a restricted state, I couldn't even touch his body. In a head-on fight, as long as he is not a pervert like Jolie, he is confident that he can defeat him even with A-level and S-level abilities. But for a guy like Bai Dao who only knows how to run, he feels like a fist hitting cotton. The students were whispering to each other, and the smiles on their faces grew stronger. Feeling the atmosphere around him, Chi Fu's face twitched. This is the first class. His lifelong reputation must not be ruined here. No matter how high the quality of this group of freshmen is, they can't all be weird and perverted. No, we must find our place as soon as possible. He took a deep breath and looked at everyone's face fiercely. Those who are too fierce will not be considered, and those who are too vulgar will not be considered. Finally, his eyes rested on a young man. This young man looked very ordinary, with a tired face, dark circles under his eyes, and not very strong. I decided it was him. "Come here." Shu Yi walked forward with a weird look on his face, not expecting that he would be called upon by everyone. "Is your ability more destructive than his?" Chi Fu pointed at Jolie. "Far worse. Then your ability is the same as his, only running." He pointed at Bai Dao again. "Absolutely not." "Ha." Chi Fu breathed a sigh of relief for no reason. It seemed that this time he could show his true strength. He didn't even ask Shu Yi's ability level. Because in his opinion, every new student here cannot have a lower ability level than him. "Very good, let's get started." Chi Fu looked solemnly and assumed a fighting posture. With his previous experience, he no longer dared to be careless with these new students. Shu Yi shrugged his shoulders, a blood mist bloomed on his body, and he punched Chi Fu. When he saw the blood mist, Chi Fu was slightly startled, with confusion in his eyes. Is there such an ability among abilities above sea level? Although he is considered well-informed, D-level abilities account for the vast majority of awakened people, and there are thousands of D-level abilities recorded in the database. He couldn't recognize D-level abilities like boiling blood at the first time. He didn't think about it carefully and just slapped his hands. Shu Yi's fist hit his palm, and he caught it firmly. Chi Fu also breathed a sigh of relief. Judging from this strength, it seems that this is just a material amplification type of ability. The increase is also extremely limited and not very strong. He smiled lightly, pulled Shu Yi's body down hard, and punched him with his right fist. But just when his attack was about to hit Shu Yi raised his head and smiled, threw a brick from his arms with his left hand, and smashed it into Chi Fu's fist. A terrifying impact erupted, shattering the bricks into pieces. Taking advantage of this gap, Shu Yi raised his knee and bumped it, aiming directly at Chi Fu's crotch. Chi Fu's face turned pale. He didn't expect Shu Yi to be so insidious, and immediately retracted his palm to block it. Shu Yi took advantage of the situation and pulled his hand away, retracted his knee-lifting leg and stepped forward, his left palm coming towards his face. "You little guy, your methods are too cruel." Chi-Fu's expression became serious and angry. He didn't expect that Shu Yi would do anything to defeat him. In a frontal battle, he used all possible means. In his opinion, this fighting method was simply despicable and could not be considered just. What he dislikes the most in his life is this kind of fighting method. Chi-Fu made up his mind to give Shu Yi some color and give this student a good education. But just as he raised his eyes, a piece of white dust came out of Shu Yi's left hand. FK. Chi-Fu finally couldn't hold it back and cursed loudly. Who would have thought that Shu Yi would carry such an insidious thing as lime powder with him? The dust hit his face, and his face suddenly turned white. His eyes were soaked in lime powder, and he suddenly felt unbearable pain. He closed his eyes tightly and could not see anything. However, even in this unexpected situation, Chi-Fu still remained calm in his heart. Although he couldn't see with his eyes, he quickly focused his energy on his ears and listened to the movements around him. Even if he can't see, as long as he can hear the sound, he can still take the advantage. But Chi-Fu didn't expect that under the stunned gazes of the students, Shu Yi took out a gong from his arms with great calmness. Is this guy Doraemon? He can fit so many things in his arms. Fu Yi's eyes were full of disbelief, and his evaluation of Shu Yi reached a new level. Bai Dao on the other side flashed his eyes and murmured to himself, "Brother Shu Yi, you are much more insidious than me." These things were naturally stored by Shu Yi in the world of the pot. He put his hands into his arms, actually just to cover up a little. As for why there are these things, it can only be said that they are self-defense items that he had prepared long ago during his 3 years of high school in order to prevent sneak attacks from various forces such as the Annihilation Alliance. After getting the Julie pot, he also put them in it for emergencies. He was already familiar with this set of combos, and he didn't know how many people he had deceived using this. At this moment, he calmly raised the gong, gently stretched it forward, and slightly approached Chi-Fu's ear. Just wait for the moment he takes action and attack him. Chi-Fu concentrated his energy on his ears, and his hearing doubled. He kept moving his body with his eyes closed to prevent Shu Yi from rushing in from other angles to launch a sneak attack. Clang! Shu Yi banged the gong in his hand hard. A deafening sound suddenly sounded, and Chi-Fu, whose hearing had doubled, screamed, his ears ringing as if he was going to be deafened. At this moment, his head was buzzing, and it was extremely difficult to even stand still, let alone listen to Shu Yi's movements. He barely managed to steady his body, and relying on his own perception, a burst of energy seemed to rush from in front of him. He's here. Chi-Fu couldn't hide the anger in his heart, and he activated his ability and punched in front of him. The terrifying explosive power seemed to shatter something. But at this moment, a cold object pressed against the back of his head. Shu Yi held half of the brick in his hand, without even looking at the other half that was shattered. He smiled and said, "Before the second impact breaks out, you shouldn't be able to activate your abilities continuously, right? Teacher Chi, let's finish the order." Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.